Starting in three, two, one.
Buenos días y bienvenidos al
Good
webinar
morning and welcome to the webinar on traceability in agri-food logistics chains. Before starting, we'd like to remind you that there is simultaneous interpretation in English. You can access the interpretation easily on the globe icon on your Zoom app. Hi again, everybody. I'm Gabriela Arteaga, a development economist, researcher, and consultant for the Inter-American Development Bank. Today, we will continue with our series of webinars on the uh, public good initiative for the region on traceability in agri-food logistics chains and mechanisms for response to health crises. In keeping with the global theme of the initiative, we're going to talk about food traceability and its relationship to logistical systems. Over the last few years, we've faced challenges that require new integrated responses by actors in agri-food logistics chains. These challenges are linked to the current landscape where that is still characterized by disruptions and uncertainty in global supply chains, with concrete problems associated to the crisis in the maritime industry and to the limitations of the fertilizer trade. All of the above evidently affects agri-food production chains and has contributed to the increase of prices and to a possible food crisis. Faced with this context, there is a growing concern over security and to improve controls and minimize risk in production, commerce, and distribution, which is possible through a greater visibility in and agri-food food chains. So in the last few years, creating visibility in supply chains has become an integral part of industries throughout the world. Tracing and follow-up of food products in every step of the chain is an important activity to have economic agents comply with food security regulations. Furthermore, as we'll see in today's session, technologies applied to traceability allow for the generation of information that facilitates decision making. Governments have begun to understand and to see this change, and they are starting to capitalize on the value of security and traceability by promoting the use of technology in agri-logistics. So in today's webinar, we'll go more in depth on the concept of traceability, and we will find out about the importance of traceability in for in logistics chains with cases applied to agri-foods in Latin America and the Caribbean. Now, to this aim, in the first part of the webinar, we'll find out about the experience of the GS1 firm and the implementation of standards and solutions for improving efficiency, safety, and visibility of food chains, food supply chains. In the second part, we will have an intervention, a participation by the CEO of the firm NASA Systems that will talk about their approach, which is called vis granular visibility. Then we'll have a session for questions and answers where that I invite you to participate in by using the Q&A button. We are going to start the webinar by finding out about the importance of traceability and also finding out about successful examples of products and agro-logistics chains at the transnational level. Now, for this, And I would like to let Milagros Davila from the GS1 Peru firm the floor. Milagros is a consultant, auditor, and trainer in Latin America. She is an industrial engineer from the University of Lima with many certifications in logistics from the Latin American Logistics Centers, the Technological from Monterrey, Ohio State University, among others. She possesses over 25 years of experience training small SMEs and producers, as well as experience in consultancies in issues related to the flows related to food supply chains. She also has experience implementing projects for automation with logistical standards and advising state and also private institutions. Welcome, Milagros, and please go ahead with your presentation. Great. Thank you very much, Gabriela. Thank you very much for the invitation. It is a pleasure truly to be here and share with you all how global standards, in this case, GS1 global standards, support implementations for traceability throughout the food chain, which, as Gabriela said, is so and so important nowadays. So, first, I wanted to give you some a briefing of our traceability. So, GS1 has over 50 years throughout the world. We are the institution that implements uh, global standards, both for identification and communication. So we have a presence in over 115 countries uh, throughout the world. Right? So now, why do we talk about traceability? For many reasons, as you will see. But basically, and I think the chief focus here is how companies and supply chains provide trust in their products and safety, how they keep the reputation of their products so that there is visibility and total control of all processes happening within their organization or within a food chain. So if we talk about innocuousness, there are many statistics. One of them, for example, uh, by the WHO talks about there being over 600 million people getting sick due to contaminated products, and of those, some 420,000 people roughly end up losing their lives, which could have been prevented if one had a good traceability system. Now, another topic is the fact that the it has to do with regulations, new markets, more demanding customers throughout the world who ask for more and more information, regulations that faced with these the economic crises, uh, come up year after year, month after month, so as to combat this crisis. So the only way really to combat this is through records and with traceability. And also, both in food supply chains as well as governments are all working on supply, meaning on legal origin. Last year, we worked on the food uh, supply chain because the because an important percentage of animal protein is fish, and in Peru we have FAO statistics that talk of $360 million being lost due to illegal fishing. So Peru, together with other governments of Peru, together with other institutions throughout the world, started to work on how forms and records needed to become aligned with the GSD, which we'll talk about later, which is a global forum on how all records need to be aligned to the standards so that the entire fishing supply chain uh, can be traceable. So what is traceability? Traceability is having knowledge of all the procedures, records, all the way from the harvest or capture of a raw material uh, through packaging and label, and it's traversing all the nodes of a food supply chain, the primary sector, the primary industry, the secondary packager, the transport, which is very important, that be it maritime, aerial, terrestrial, uh, the wholesaler, distributor, the great centers and logistical hubs throughout the world also have to have records. Uh, the the retail centers, the big small retail, the small bodegas, the small convenience stores that these products arrive at, and also very important how institutions that oversee that enforce in these rules have to have timely information that arrives thanks to traceability methods. And finally, when this product reaches the consumer, it has to be legible in a timely way, and it has to guarantee confidence and traceability of this product that the end consumer is going to ingest and is going to provide well-being for the family. That's basically the end goal. Now, to do that, there are three large principles of traceability to achieve this interoperability. First, to identify. Identify what? Identify the plants or the nodes that the product goes through. Identify the raw materials, the finished products. Capture what? Procedures, data, records, and share. How do you share all of this? Is it software, large databases, technological tools that allow us to do this so that this entire chain can be communicated and that it achieves interoperability of all the different chains? Now, as far as identification, as I already mentioned, there are global standards for all those nodes and the entities that participate in the food supply chain. For example, capture, factories, distributors, marketing, etc. And there are also identifiers that allow us to point out the boxes, packages, and products for the point of sale, etc. So all of those participants of a food supply chain have a standard available to be identified and to have there not be mistakes in this capture of information. Then we also have that there are standards internationally for each of these levels that I've talked to you about. And above all GS1s throughout the world have not just identification, but also are able to identify the quality of the data. A barcode is the ID of a product, and it has to clearly reflect all the information in a timely and accurate manner, so that it is a true reflection of what the producer or the owner of the brand wants to present to the end consumer, right? So now, when it comes to sharing, what is it that we're going to be sharing, or what are we capturing? Well, events and so CTs and KDs. And KDEs, all food supply chains have their own procedures, and these procedures, be they internal or external, have certain procedures that need to be mapped out. Now, what are these processes, these procedures? These are the ones that are going to come up all the way from receipt or a harvesting of a raw material through manufacturing, through reception, and all the way to the sale. Now, how so? Well, each process has certain events associated to it, certain records that need to be uh, kept, and they need to answer these five questions. Who? Like, what parts are involved? What is the object? What's being done? Harvesting, producing, shipping, etc. Where are these operations happening? At a factory, at a port, at the international point of sale, at customs, etc. When did it happen? The day and date are very important. And why did it happen? What was the important event? So, what is the end goal of traceability by using standards? So, for example, one of the big tools and standards that the GS1 manages is visibility. So here we have all procedures duly mapped out, and for each of the procedures, we have the five questions that records need to answer, and or that the data need to answer. And this is how the standard is used, and this is how each one of the records is shared, so that should there be any problem at this point or at any point in the chain, we have we have reliable information, trustworthy information as to what happened, because we have recorded it. We have a history of everything that could have happened in each one of these procedures, and this is uh, allows us to share and make visible and interoperable every step. And so now, what challenges are we facing? Well, we are facing the fact that public and private systems and many of the governments are not stabilized. Many are state, others don't complement each other. So then also there are many standards that industries work with that are not authenticated, that are not really the information that we want to transmit. Also, many of the processes are very manual nowadays, so we have to connect them and make them more automated, so that it allows us to digitize all processes so that this capture of information can be much quicker and affordable and obvious and more opportune and reliable. Now, so what is the new challenge nowadays, both for the public as well as the private sector, is to keep these links, be be it digitally and interoperably, so that every system, be whatever system it may be, independent of the brand or the country, so that they all speak the same language and so that they can transmit the same information for all of them. Okay, so had there been or uh, a had a had a good traceability system been implemented, then many crises in the world would have been averted. These are some crises in the world that have meant many losses, economic losses, that's due to their not having been uh, implemented a good traceability system. And also, on the other hand, there's also the fact that poor communication can also be very damaging to the food chain. In Spain, for example, in the year 2011, well, Germany and Spain, there was a problem with an alert that happened in cucumbers in Germany, and it was pointed out without any proof or any traceability that cucumbers coming from Spain were the cause of the infection. So there was a huge scandal about it. They blocked imports. There was a communication at a panic note for people to stop purchasing fresh vegetables from Spain. It was enormous chaos, enormous economic losses, deaths even, and this was due to poor communication. So we need to identify records, but also we need to know how to communicate these things and to have uh, reliable, trustworthy sources for this information so that one can carry out a proper recall that is very specific and so that what actually happened can be identified. So, two Spanish companies caused the chaos. They sued the German government. It was enormous chaos. There were enormous terrible economic losses. Now, on the contrary, in Chile last year, something very similar happened. Not for cucumbers, but for a milk product for babies. That, in a coherent way, uh, it users were informed that a particular lots of products might have been contaminated, and out of precaution they shouldn't be consumed, but they had specified what product, what lot number, and what areas that the product had been shipped to. So how can we then make sure that there is a proper implementation so from GS1's point of view, we've managed to elaborate a standard base on ISO 22005, where through all the traceability records and all the regulations that you see, both from the food sector as well as other sectors, such as logistics and health, there's a standard has been created where, as a methodological tool, it is used to diagnose how a company is doing with traceability, so that we review processes for identification, procedures, operations, and how that information is managed throughout the food chain, throughout the food supply chain. Some of these examples are the ones that we are showing in the second part when it comes to Peru and when it comes to LATAM. So for Peru, we have many food supply chains that I'll that I'll roughly explain, the ones that are more important. Plus, we also have other developments such as sesame in Bolivia and Ecuador. So we have, for example, food for, and so in Uruguay, we're also going to talk about how we worked on APEC economies. And in Piura, in the north of our country, we organized a project financed by the Ministry of Production where traceability records were incorporated. And down the line, there was work with the producers themselves with organic cinnamon and with coffee, so that there were almost 9 months in this region helping uh, everybody from the harvesters to create all the records manually of all the processes. And right around that time, there was a health warrant alert in Europe. They received a complaint and they were able to correct their manuals, and they were able to answer that alert. Also, in the south of our country, in Arequipa, we worked around the year 2012, I would say 2013. We came up with a series of trainings so that these Andean women, Highland women, community of Highland Andean women who sold aromatic herbs. They had hired a company that had was certifying them for fair play organic uh, certification, and we supported them with manual records. In this case, there was no software involved, and we supported them so that they could fulfill the requirements that the other larger certifications were asking them for, such as organic certification. Now, this is very important, and I wanted to tell you about this that we also carried out an implementation of orchids in the jungle of in the tropical part of our country, in the jungle, in Moyobamba, of a nursery. This person that you see here is called Teresita. This person was the only person who knew exactly where all the plants in the nursery were and what species of orchids. So she was a brain with a lot of information. So what we did was to help them identify with global standards and with traceability records so that all of it wouldn't be in her mind, but in records. And then in a second stage, we trained them, and then they implemented a software that 5 6 years later they were able to implement software where they were able to hire another company that helped them implement sales software and control of all of their orchids. Then in Chanchamayo, Pasco, we also had the opportunity to work with an Ashanika community, and where we were able to be the support of this organization, where the organic certification demanded that they should have standards for all identification of their products, for their producers and their plots. So GS1 intervened in this opportunity, giving them standardized codes both for their land, their lots, one by one, and each of the producers were identified with a barcode, standardized so that they would know who was the person who cultivated it and where the cultivation took place, so that this could be input for following processes of identification. Then, in the year 2017, roughly, there was an implementation in Cerro de Pasco where they hired us to, through traceability, there was a improvement of calves that came out uh, of Angus cattle. We used readers, RF chips, so that we were able to confirm that with uh, artificial insemination of the Angus race, then the beef improved. Then, as I mentioned before, at the beginning, anything that has to do with origins is very important. In the year 2019, 2020, right in the pandemic, the Ministry of Production, through the CITES network, hired us for a project financed by the FAO to see what requirements would needed to be fulfilled to make sure that it wasn't illegally cut down. So we ran a study uh, so that we could have this chain have records that would determine the legal origin of these products. Likewise, as I mentioned before, in fishing, we also did a whole study where all companies, both manufacturers as well as the fishing industry, became aligned with all of their records so that they could fulfill GSP, the GDSD, where the global standard for traceability, where GS1 helped them to organize their forms so that they could be readable from any system. Likewise, sorry, just give me a second because it didn't go to the next one. There we go. Uh, we ran a study on in Caras. We ran an implementation to determine origins from the same place of a of an agave distiller with an app designed just for them. In Bolivia, we implemented uh, into the year 2013-14 implementation with Sesame, where 8 organizations were able to reaffirm that global standards do work, both at the manual record keeping system as well as as computerized systems. And lastly, the APEC project, where, and then I leave you the video, uh, where together with Malaysia, Mexico, and Peru, we ran a study on how global standards contributed to having economies achieve certain benefits. And what we did, we were able to implement traceability with traceability software, where we were able to confirm that global standards could work for green asparagus import chains from Peru to the US with GS1 China traceability software. So what we were able to do with the Ministry of Commerce, we were able to determine what were important processes, procedures, what were the records that needed to be gathered, what records needed to be gathered, and how they should be imported to computer information systems that we're going to be comparing them. So ultimately, these were some of the pictures of what was implemented. Some temperature records, given that that's very important to do, and information was also gathered uh, on software all the way from the export from Peru all the way until the arrival in Target. So that was all. I hope I made time. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Milagro,
Thank you
por
very
tu
much, Milagro,
presentación.
for
Y
your
a mí me
presentation.
gustaría
Uh,
recalcar la importancia de
I'd also
conocer
like
todas
to
las
point out the
capacidades
importance of having the
interconectadas que
entire
vimos
chain
en
be
tu
interoperable,
presentación.
as we saw in your
Esto
presentation.
definitivamente para el
This
beneficio tanto de
definitely
las
for the
firmas como
benefit
de las
both
agencias
of
de control y las
signing
administraciones
as
que están
well as
pendientes
control
en lo
agencies.
relacionado
And
a
for
aspectos
example, when it
fiscales,
comes to
asuntos de comercio,
fiscal
asuntos del control
issues,
del
tax
transporte, de
issues,
cargas, de
commerce,
recursos. También
transportation,
me gustaría remarcar que dentro de estos beneficios es importante la apertura
shipping,
de nuevos
and in
mercados para
these
las
benefits,
firmas.
it's important to open new
Muchas veces
markets
se suele
for
pensar que con
signatures, for signing,
inversiones de
for
capital, de
firms.
infraestructura es
Sometimes
suficiente para que
we
las
tend to
empresas
think that it's enough just
inserten a
with
las redes
capital and
globales,
infrastructure
sin
to
tomar en
have
cuenta los
companies be
beneficios
inserted into global
ambientales,
chains
los
without
beneficios
taking into
know-how,
account
y lo más
standards and
importante, es
know-how,
decir, es el
which is
conocimiento
a unaccounted for
de
know-how. For
calidad
example, knowing
de las
how to
firmas y
implement a
sobre todo
traceability
las
system
pymes que
that
van a hacer
firms and
pruebas de
particularly
calidad
SMEs, as we have seen
necesitan tener,
in the present cases, need to
no
have.
necesariamente de manera
Not necessarily
tecnológica, pero sí en materia de
technologically,
registro de
but
información.
when it comes to
También
recording
me gustaría
information,
destacar la cercana colaboración pública
I'd
con
also like to point
organismos
out
multilaterales
the
e
public
instituciones
cooperation
diversas
and
para dar
having
respuesta
joint
a los retos
actions
mencionados en
so that
materia de
we
fortalecer
can
estos
help
vínculos y el
strengthen these
intercambio de
bonds
información de
and
manera
the exchange
fluida.
of information in a fluid manner.
Para continuar
And
profundizando en la
now, to
relevancia de la
continue
trazabilidad desde una visión
in depth on
transnacional,
the relevance of
a
traceability,
continuación quiero darle la
up
palabra a
next, I'd like
Elcio
to
Gracia.
welcome
Elcio es
Elcio
socio
Gracia.
fundador
Elcio
y
is a
CEO de Nasser
founding partner and CEO
Systems, y
of
también es
Nasser
socio de
Systems,
Integrated
of,
Consulting,
and
donde
he's
su
also a
expertise se
partner
centra en
at
logística y
as
gestión de cadenas
in
de
a consulting
suministro,
company. So his
con
expertise is
soluciones
focused
desarrolladas
on
para
supply
compañías
chains with
como
products
Bayer,
designed
Crop
for customers
Science,
such
Burger
as
King,
Bayer Crop
y
Science,
Consorcio
Burger King
Río
Brazil,
Energía, Global Business
Rio
and
Energy
Fund, entre
Consortium,
otros.
among others.
Adicionalmente, cuenta con
Additionally, he
Ok, ¿qué pasó?
okay, what happened?
Elcio, es un placer que
So
puedas
Elcio, it's a
acompañarnos
pleasure for
en
you to
este
be here
tipo de
with us,
sesión.
and please go ahead with your presentation. Thank you, Gabriela, and thank you for the invitation, Milagros, for the presentation. Such a richly detailed presentation, and saving me having to convince people about traceability, because it's the foundations. These are the key pieces of information of what we talked about in Nazar. But Nazar is it's a standard built in the U.S. I have a partner in Brazil. The other two partners are in the U.S. And we believe that in traceability is something that is absolutely basic. And we want to expand the notion of traceability for what we call uh, gra- gra- wide angle visibility, meaning that we understand that a supply chain is made up of different silos of information, and people don't take the time to add this information because to aggregate this data, because it's very time consuming. It's a very slow process through emails, phones, and emails. So until you're able to get to manage to aggregate all of that information, sometimes it's either too late to take action on what one wants to learn, or it's not. So our objective is to change that reality, and Why? Because in addition to requirement by the government, needs for compliance or needs for to support sustainability in the business, we also see a need for traceability. Plus, one third of food produced in the world are wasted, and 40% of that waste happens during the supply chain. Additionally, consumers are becoming more and more demanding, and the required transparency and interruptions in the food chain are in the news all day. Withdrawals from recalls from markets, concept traditional traceability systems are focused on logistics, specifically point to point, temperature, location. But we believe that it should be, it should go more beyond just data gathering. We should add source information, granular data in the product box. And an example that could happen that I could give you is from, say, harvesting of lettuce when a plastic box or a container is identified where it's going to be transported. Once this product is scanned, our platform is going to find in this hacienda system where it came from, what fertilizer was used, what water treatment was used, what certification of the staff. So all the production factors in this farm are going to be transmitted to our platform. Then this product is put in a refrigerated truck to be transported, and then we go on to environmental factors, temperature, time, and other factors until we reach a processing center where we continue adding environmental information, temperature, location until this product is processed and the lettuce it's gonna go to water, certain temperature with chlorine solution or what have you, in order to be transformed into a processed lettuce that has been added to carrots or tomatoes to make it a salad mix. And all of the factors, all the historical factors will be added to the finished product. So, and we'll continue adding environmental factors until the product arrives uh, at a restaurant or a supermarket so that it can be given to uh, the end consumer. So part of it is going to be important to each. What part of it is going to be important to each of our clients is going to be what we're going to be working on it. And so as a proof of concept, I do want to take some time to talk about, for example, here in near Sao Paulo, 150 kilometers from. We started in a hacienda with a harvest of lettuce. We identified all of the plastic boxes. We did an optical reading with RFID, with identification through radio frequency, to control temperature, location, etc. It was a great lesson in this first moment. So to have technology work perfectly, so gather data uh, uh, have been able to be transmitted to the platform without a problem. Uh, so now the operational part has been full of learning. So that to do optical reading, you have to have a line of sight. You have to be able to read the label, and that it slows down the process of transferring boxes enormously. So there's a loss of productivity. Also, when you do an RF reading, it doesn't generate this problem, and the biggest part, the learnings get we are making sure that we are in lot 79, and it was the only area that was being harvested at that moment. So, and all positioning factors So identifying every box was ultimately important. So during all the stages of proof of concept, this type of learning was the most intense. And how to gather information without making noise in existing processes. It's just modifying existing processes. Yes, if there is a possibility of improving them, never to create uh, disruptions in the work that could create strong resistance to change. Uh, then we will follow this lettuce until it reaches a processing center, checking its temperature, its location until it's been processed, transformed into a finished product, taken to a distribution center, and at the end, it is delivered to a fast food restaurant. Other lessons that we captured throughout this process, in addition to how to capture information without making noise in existing processes, have been, for example, this truck has been slowed down. Its cargo has been slowed down at the farm due to a defect in refrigeration. So it has arrived at its destination at a time that is relatively late, but with an inadequate temperature. Uh, the so it basically it's not received. We leave it overnight, and that way we can offload it in the morning so that the temperature was correct. But people were fooling themselves. They were actually cooling the product even though it was not had arrived. The cold chain had been broken, and so and this information wasn't being captured in any other way. So the third learning point was that this product, at the end of its processing, it is given 12 days of a shelf life uh, due to analysis and considerations and treatment in the food logistics chain. So those 12 days of shelf life are based on the assumption that the product is harvested today and processed tomorrow, whereas a product was being processed on the day that we executed the proof of concept had been harvested 4 days earlier, meaning that those 12 days were another um, illusion. So anyway, we have several other. We could continue with several other items, but I'll stop at this point because I think that the fundamental point is for these agricultural products. That was the example that I wanted to stop at. Uh, the most fundamental lesson is that uh, be it RFID, be it Internet of Things, all of these are very mature technologies. We had no problem with any technologies. All of the learning that we have became very important and related to how to capture data without creating problems without making noise in the processes. And this is what is absolutely fundamental because the client will not perceive that there is a loss of value. Uh, if they perceive that capturing data is going to create a loss of value, then they won't see the final value. And the last item I wanted to comment on was that we believe in a quality footprint and sustainability and compliance and in following the rules, and all of this is what we will deliver. But the our selling point for our services is to improve operational efficiency in processes, because a business will not invest in technology and implementing uh, pros- data and in sharing data if it doesn't believe that it's going to get short-term returns. And these short-term returns, we believe, are only possible through improving operational efficiency in the chain from end to end, from the farm all the way to the consumer. And we strongly believe in that. And we offer our services to whoever is interested, not necessarily end to end because it's not it's quite a complex project, but at any point in the chain that it is applicable, that our solution is applicable, we are available. Basically, what that was what I wanted to say and to tell you folks. You have my contact information. You have our website. Thank you very much, and we will continue.
Perfecto, muchísimas gracias, Elcio. Ha sido
Excellent. Thank you very much, Elcio.
bastante
It's been a very
interesante definitivamente el
interesting
enfoque
presentation.
que
Definitely interesting
toma
the
con respecto
approach
a la
that you take
recolección
with
de
regard
datos
to gathering
de
of
manera integral
information
en una plataforma.
comprehensively
Es
in a
bastante
platform. It's very
eficiente para las firmas,
efficient
ya que
for firms because
típicamente
for
las
companies
empresas
because
individualmente
usually individual
no pueden dar
companies
respuesta a temas de
aren't able
trazabilidad
to provide
tanto
answers
a
with regard
nivel
to
individual y
traceability,
mucho menos
be it
a escala
individually,
global
much
para
less
estas
so throughout the
pero este
entire
tipo de
chain.
soluciones
But this type of
sencillamente generan
solution
visibilidad
definitely creates
optimizando la
visibility,
cadena de suministro de la
optimizing the
finca, de la
supply
granja
chain
a la mesa.
from the farm all the way
También es
to the
claro
table.
que
It's
este
also
tipo
clear
de
that
soluciones
this kind of
ayudan a reducir
solution
los
helps to
riesgos
reduce risks,
y el mecanismo
and
de rastreo y seguimiento
the
es lo que permite la
mechanism
mejora
for
de la eficiencia.
traceability and follow up is what
Eh,
allows for improving of
para
efficiency.
continuar
Now, to continue
con la discusión, vamos a
with the
proceder,
conversation,
vamos a
we
estar
will now proceed
disponibles
in the time
a
that we have available
responder algunas
to
preguntas del chat.
answer some questions from the
Primero,
chat.
gracias a todos los que nos han
Now, thank
aportado preguntas y
you to all of us who
comentarios.
have added comments and
Vamos a
questions.
iniciar con una
We are going
pregunta
to start
dirigida a
with a question
Milagros.
directed to Milagros.
Milagros, ¿qué
Milagros,
acciones se pueden
what
impulsar desde
actions
los
can
gobiernos
be
para aumentar
taken
la
from the
trazabilidad y
starting from
cultura de
governments
recolección de
to
información,
improve
sobre
traceability and a
todo para el
culture
caso de pymes?
of
En tu
traceability of
experiencia, ¿cuál
information in the
podría
case of
ser el
SMEs
mecanismo
particularly? In
práctico
your
más
experience,
eficiente en este
what could
tipo
be
de
the mechanism
soluciones?
for this type of solution
Adelante,
to be
Milagros, con tu
implemented? Go
respuesta.
ahead, Milagros, with your
Muchas
answer.
gracias, Gabriela. Sí, a ver,
Thank you, Gabriela. Well,
ya venimos trabajando
we have already been
con
working
muchos
with
ministerios
many
en
ministries
Perú, por ejemplo, el Ministerio
in
de
Peru. For
Producción, el
example, the Ministry
Ministerio
of
de
Production,
Comercio Exterior y
the
Turismo,
Ministry
apoyando
of
justamente este
Foreign
tipo
Commerce and
de
Tourism, and
proyectos para
to
pymes.
support these
Este
these
mecanismo
programs for
nació
SMEs.
desde la
But this
normativa
has
o
to
las
come from the
recomendaciones de
regulations or
estos ministerios. Entonces,
from the
esto es lo
rules
que
issued
se
by these
basa en
ministries.
las
So
entidades como la
part of
nuestra,
what we
que
try to
las
do, institutions such as
entidades
ours or other
regulatorias,
institutions that offer
en vez
technology,
de
what we try to do
buscar
is to provide,
informar de una forma
to inform
coherente,
coherently,
oportuna,
timely manner, and
los
also to try
sensibilizar
to
a los
raise awareness among
operadores, a los ejecutivos de estos
operators,
ministerios de la
executives in
importancia
these various
que
ministries
tiene
concerning
trazabilidad
the
no solamente
importance that
para la
traceability
economía
has,
nacional,
not just for the
sino
national
en
market,
temas
but
también
also
de
for
exportaciones. Entonces,
exports. And
tenemos como
so
misión
we have
nuestra
as a mission
trabajar con
of
estos
ours to
comités
work
de los grandes
with these
gremios
committees for the
de
larger
exportadores, de
exporting
sensibilizar con
guilds
talleres, con
to raise
mejores
awareness through
conceptos,
workshops, discussions,
presentaciones,
debates,
donde se les
presentations,
inculca un poco
where
y
we
se
drive
sensibiliza no solamente a los
home the
productores que son
point
los que van a
with
obtener los
awareness, not just
beneficios,
for
sino
producers
también
who are going to
a
get the
los
benefits, but for
proyectos
those who can
financiados que
execute
banca
projects that are financed
internacional
by national or
puede
international
obtener
banks
con
so
estos
that
proyectos
they can
algún tipo
support
de
these kinds of
subvención.
products and that small and medium businesses
Súper interesante,
can
Milagros,
benefit.
sobre todo lo que mencionabas en tu
Very
presentación
interesting,
sobre
Milagros,
la
particularly
cultura
what
de
you mentioned in your
recolección de
presentation on
información,
this
¿no? Que no necesariamente
culture
se
of information
necesitan,
gathering, where you don't
digamos,
necessarily
grandes
need
proyectos tecnológicos,
great
pero más que
technological
todo
projects, but more
incentivar
than
lo que es
anything
la
to just
cultura de
promote
la
the
recolección de
culture
información.
of gathering
Y es algo
information.
que
And
efectivamente
that's
puede
something
ayudar a la
that indeed
eficiencia
can
de las
help
pymes.
with efficiency, not just of
Vamos a
SMEs.
seguir con otra
We're going to
pregunta
continue with another
dirigida a
question, also
Milagros.
directed to
Y es la
Milagros,
siguiente. En los
and it
proyectos
is
de
as follows.
trazabilidad
In
binacional, ¿cómo fue
traceability,
la
in
relación
binational
al trabajar
traceability
con el
projects,
gobierno
what was the
nacional y
relationship like with
nacional?
local governments and
¿Hubo
national governments?
complejidades
Was
relativas a
there
la cantidad
complexity
de actores
related to
institucionales
the amount of
encargados en este
institutional
tipo de
actors at
proyectos?
play in this kind of project?
Sí, sí. A ver,
Yes.
mucho impactó
Yes,
por el tema
there
de
was a big
lobbying que
impact
se tuvo que
with
hacer antes
lobbies,
de
that
hacer la
lobbying that needed
implementación.
to do before
Por
implementing.
ejemplo, en este tema
So,
de
for example, when
traceability,
with
la fase
APEC,
previa,
there were many
los
prior
gobiernos,
meetings
tanto
with
de Perú,
governments, both
en
for
Ecuador,
Peru in
Colombia,
customs as well as
y
for the
hubo
U.S.
otras
and
personas
other
que también participaban,
also
como
other economies that
Brasil, que
participated,
Australia, que participaron de este
such
proyecto.
as New Zealand, for example,
Entonces,
that
hubo un
participated in
tema de
this
lobby inicial de
project. So it's
convencimiento
initial
de
lobbying,
los
convincing,
ejecutivos, sobre todo
getting
que
executives
colaboren con la
particularly to
información,
collaborate
porque
with
siempre
information
no es
because
tan fácil
oftentimes
encontrar que los
because
proveedores
sometimes
de
it's not
información
so
y los
easy to
operadores
have these
tengan esta información
customs control points
pública.
provide information. So, like I said, it is little by little we're creating this culture of record keeping of information, and governments little by little are committing more and more to having traceability work, to have it work, and that there are mechanisms to have it be interoperable and for information to be shared, always respecting confidentiality, of course, and control. Excellent, Milagros. Thank you very much for your points of view. Continuing with the round of questions, we'd like to direct a question to Elcio. Elcio, the question from the audience, it has to do with blockchain technologies. And it is as follows. Blockchain technology is one of the trends with potential to change traditional operations in logistics. Are there possibilities for traceability in logistics and supply chains based on blockchain? And what would be needed for this to become reality? Thank you for the question, Gabriela. The the base of the blockchain, which is important for traceability, are two fundamental points. Confidentiality of information is one, and the fact that this information would only be shared with the owner of the information, with whoever the owner shares it with. Now, to do this, I mean, pure blockchain, what's used with crypto, is not the only solution. There are ways to do it without being in the blockchain, in a pure blockchain, and so the level of confidentiality needed and of permissivity of this information, you can have that same level, but without using a pure blockchain, because it's a very expensive technological infrastructure, and that is going to add end costs to the user. There are other uses of in supply chains where blockchain is absolutely fundamental uh, for foreign commerce contracts. So when you need to have more than one institution entity writing and reading data, but in our case, pure blockchain isn't as important. There are two fundamental characteristics of the blockchain that cannot be missing for it, though. Which one is that the information has to be confidential and reliable, and second that the user can trust that their information is only going to be shared with whoever they allow. Without this, there will not be enough trust for visibility. Perfect, Elsia. Thank you very much for your opinion and for your point of view. It's really a hot topic in the region and in the US as well. And it's a very controversial issue that a lot of attention has been paid to. We have another question for you, Celcio, and it is as follows from the audience. You mentioned capturing data without making noise, which means that we would not modify existing processes. So, how can we not digitize errors and increase efficiency? Well, the technology is fundamental for that because, why we believe in RFID technology, for example. Uh, by capturing information through RFID, you eliminate the human factor. So we don't have a single answer for this. The answer is in bringing the operation and understanding the process and identify end to end and avoiding errors in each operation. If there is a system already implemented in this ranch, we are going to use this system to capture data. If there is a sensor in the truck or in the warehouse, we're going to capture from that sensor. If there's nothing, if there is, it's a small farm that doesn't really have technology, we're going to replace the Excel sheet by an electronic sheet in their cell phone, and people will gather data directly from there. So there is no single answer. It's an individual answer for each institution in each specific situation, but it will always the basic effort will always be to eliminate human intervention and transcription of information from system to system. Okay, perfect. Interesting. Thank you very much for your point of view, Elsa. Given time constraints, we will have to finish the session. Personally, I think it's been very productive. and very useful for all those connected in the region from Latin America, the Caribbean. We can conclude that from the point of view of institutional actors, it is relevant to reduce logistical costs and increase resilience of agri-food products for continuity of agribusiness. The benefits of implementing traceability in agro-logistic chains are important not just strategically for the for firms, but also at the macro regional level because it allows for production chains to fulfill uh, global world regulations and standard issues. So as we have observed, traceability also benefits government because it allows administrations a greater efficacy in managing incidents, crises, and/or alerts that could affect food security for countries. We should take into account that an increase in visibility implies intense collaboration and interrelations in relations between authorities and different commercial and economic operators throughout the chain. As we have seen in the cases presented throughout the webinar, it is important to have this interoperability and interconnectedness to be able to boost interoperation and risk management. And lastly, awareness of these solutions allows for key overview of the necessary actions to increase competitiveness of firms and how the public sector and multilateral institutions can help in these processes. Now, to finish, we'd like to thank Milagros and Elsia for their contributions, and we thank all participants for being with us in this session. Have an excellent day, and thank you very much once again. Goodbye. Goodbye.